Welcome to Inside Music Curation. It is Wednesday again. We're back with the expert music curators from Feed Media Group, and we hang out every other Wednesday to talk about topics around music curation. Really to kind of demystify what music curation is, to showcase this amazing team, and to talk a little bit about what it's like to curate music for businesses. Today, we're talking about indie music. What is indie music? Many people have many different answers for that. And when you're curating music for businesses, it's important for us to consult with our customers to find out what it means to them and how they want it integrated. But we wanted to just take a moment to talk about what indie music means to us, both as a business model, as a genre, and see if we get any input from you guys as well. Please feel free to comment, whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. We'll be keeping an eye on the comments and any questions you guys may have while we go. So with us today, we've got Mike Savage, Juan Hernandez-Cruz, and Claire McConnell, all expert music curators here at Feed Media Group, primarily curating radio stations for our fitness clients. All right, so let's start off. What is indie music? Now we've got indie as in they're independent, and we've got indie as in it's more of a genre. So let's just start off a little bit about what is indie music as a business case. What does that mean to start out as an indie artist?
Yeah, I mean, it meant starting, you were independent. You didn't have the support of a major label. Sort of first applied more to kind of like the alternative rock bands in the 90s that, weren't rock and roll, but had similar elements with a less mainstream sound. But they would be able to get college or independent radio play, find their fan base, albeit, smaller, create a lane for themselves in the music industry. So that sort of then popularity of those groups among a subset of the population sort of created these what we call indie labels, and sort of those bands would kind of get grouped together under that setting. I think in today's music landscape, it's more used to describe that left of center sound, that it's like maybe not like top 40 or mainstream radio as friendly, but still really talented musicians and good music, and I think less indicates now that a band is truly independent. A lot of those indie labels even are owned by the majors that are under that umbrella for the sake of business purposes. And I think there can be some interesting cases of bands who sort of set themselves off along this path of being, if not like considered an indie artist in today's world, at least like have the sound that they are, like not super mainstream. And I think it can be really interesting when a band like that then sort of gets like thrust into the mainstream. An example of that comes to mind for me is Portugal the Man. Their song "Feel It Still" got completely on radio and really sort of changed, I think, their positioning as a band and having to react and course correct and sort of how they want their sound and career to go in that sense. So, and kind of the world of social media too. Million tools to get started if you want to be an independent artist, and you can just start uploading to SoundCloud and TikTok and build from there. And I know Juan has experience in that area. I'd love to hear about.
Yeah. I loved when you brought up Portugal the Man as an example, because that's such a great case study, right? Of like a band that started off essentially doing it for themselves. They were a band independent of any company. And then through essentially using indie labels, they kind of like grew out into this kind of like bigger than life band. It's funny for, artists that aren't signed or, that are looking to be signed. A lot of independent labels end up being kind of like baby majors. It's kind of like the first, or I don't know, it's one of the steps in order to either, maintain just staying indie, staying in your niche, staying in your community, or being like Portugal the Man, where you incubated that community and then you just progressed it into a bigger, more, expansive universe of people that listen to music.
Yeah, for sure.
And anyways, what I was saying too is I'm sorry.
No worries. I'd love to hear.
Sometimes you just get distracted. I don't know. It's all
No,
good.
that's good. I'd love to hear, Mike, do you have any other examples of bands that you think, like they started out indie, they grew, they hit top 40, and then they kind of had to figure out how to keep that indie vibe?
Yeah, I mean, there are a handful in all different genres now. I mean, that's another thing that's maybe we can talk about as well, is that it while sort of the indie term started with the sort of alternative rock sounding artists, it's now sort of a catch-all for some other genres. And now there's indie pop and there's indie folk and indie hip hop. But yeah, I mean, especially when I was working in radio, I actually worked for a station that was called Indie 103.1 here in Los Angeles, the legendary radio station that actually supported those artists. There was half of our playlist was independent artists or signed to indie labels that it would eventually go on to sign to a major label deal to get their music into more ear holes, essentially, right? Because you can only do so much with a small staff at an indie label and a small budget and small relationships, and so you want to get into more ears. You do need the bigger machine behind you, I think. I totally dodged the question because you put me on the spot and I couldn't rattle a whole bunch of names of artists, but yeah, that's my answer to you.
No, I loved it. And I think, it also brings up a good point as far as, there are these independent labels, and one, I think you referred to them as the baby majors, but I think they've been really integral in creating communities around these different types of music. Do any of you want to talk on that a little bit more?
Yeah. One artist in particular is Bright Eyes, or Connor Orbs. Mm-hmm. He has his own label, Saddle Creek, and what's interesting about that, it's its own niche. It's very kind of like more Americana leaning, and it's its own community. And a lot of those artists aren't really looking to graduate outside of that, which is cool because, as part of being independent, sometimes you don't want to be a part of a larger entity. But like Bright Eyes, or I think there's a couple other entities or other bands that are on Saddle Creek that have progressed into more major territories. Sure. Yeah, it's a great incubator for talent like that. Another example is Subpop. Subpop started off as an independent label, and they were there in the height of the early 90s grunge era, and to see what that started off as, and then as they went through the 90s and picking up the talent that they have, it just shows that necessarily just because you're indie doesn't mean that you can't be heard, but it's depending on the time and place of that community, it could be big or small.
Yeah, one point is when you're trying to think about whether or not you want to cross that bridge over to the sort of major label world from the sort of baby major label, is that there's unfortunately, I think arguably there's a certain amount of compromise that you have to be okay with. You want to go to a major label, they're going to say, okay, your music's going to have to be a little bit more accessible. So we're going to suggest you write with some well-established songwriters, or work with these established hit maker producers. So there's, and some artists, like the Connor Obersts of the world, they kind of prefer to maintain the integrity of what they're doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also think, as curators, right, like labels, and we're kind of the first curators, right? Like you talk about Sub Pop or Saddle Creek, they're curating these artists, and they're putting tours together, and they're grouping bands together. So they really are, trying to foster community and grow the band's community base. And I know like Connor Oberst even had a stage at Hardly Strictly Bluegrass for quite a few years, where he would bring all the Saddle Creek folks, and you knew you could show up on Friday and it was gonna be Connor's stage. You knew what to expect. You were gonna meet other people that like the same kind of music there, and kind of take that into the festival world as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Connor's a curator as well, Get him on this call next time.
Connor, if you're listening, come and join us.
Also no biggie.
But yeah, I'd like to talk a little bit more too about, Claire, you mentioned that a lot of the indie terms kind of came out of the alternative rock and kind of indie versus alternative. So if we get out of I'm an independent artist, I'm not signed, or I'm growing, I'd love to hear, kind of some thoughts on indie as a genre and how that's different from alternative, or how that how you put those together.
Yeah, I guess it is sort of more of a like hyphenated label that goes along with it. So it can be applied to a lot of genres. And I think to like your average person listening to music, I think the sort of immediate connection will be like indie rock, alternative rock. And there's sort of like that like cool factor that accompanies the term as well, of like, about a band that everyone might not know about, that likely isn't, you're not sick of hearing on the radio yet, and sort of still has that like inherent coolness to the sound, and I think especially in today's sort of like move away from super strict genre delineations, I think it's where a lot of people get to be experimental, and get to sort of like meld a few different things together, and they don't have to fit in just the one box.
Yeah, that's so true. Funny part, I wrote an article about Young Thug's new album Punk, right? And I thought it might actually be more punky than what I got. And what I got was legitimately Bon Iver Young Thug. And what a great discussion to have this with. You have this artist, Young Thug, who's experimenting with like this like down tempo, very like ethereal style of trap, I'm guessing. But that's the coolest thing about what's happening right now is you're seeing indie music essentially being made for rap artists. Even like certain like dance artists are using indie in their implementations for music, and seeing that cross blend, that genre blend, like Claire was saying, is so interesting and cool.
Yeah. And I know another one you talked about when we were talking about this previously was like Chance the Rapper.
Oh yeah, Chance the Rapper and Macklemore. Yeah, that's actually a really more of a fun story because Chance the Rapper came out as kind of like this independent rapper and essentially was promoted that way. It was more of a, I guess you could say, a marketing kind of a thing. And obviously we know that Chance the Rapper is heavily marketed. He had a great team behind him in that era, but it also shows kind of like the clout that you get by establishing yourself or like claiming that indie cred.
Yeah,
it's hard to go backwards.
Yeah.
It's hard to have get blasted out of a cannon with a whole bunch of major label money, and then all of a sudden try to become this credible indie artist. It's gotta start here and then go there.
Yeah, and I think people always admire that kind of a story. It's the doing it in this case for a love of the music and really putting your work into it.
So when you guys are curating music for business, a lot of our clients are fitness related. What happens? Like, what do you do when you get a request from a customer that says, hey, can I get some indie music in this station, or can I get a station of indie music? Like, where do you take that? Because it can mean so many different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is to listen to what the client is looking for. Whether it be like something like I'm looking for like a down tempo chill station, throw some Bon Iver in there. Okay. Or I'm looking for, something that is more for workout. And then, you'd probably put something like a Disclosure or, Passion Pit, whatever have you, But really, it's all based upon the client, and then of course, the usage, the analytics to it. And through the analytics, you start to see what people favor for certain types of activities that they would be doing, listening to these stations. And with indie, what's great about it is that the modality, you can use certain indie for a rock station, or as I said before, like a down tempo chill station, or even like a pop station, because there is the indie pop, right? So it's very
a lot of it has to do with what our client's definition of indie is.
True too.
Really, because you could be talking to somebody and you start throwing a whole bunch of indie rock stuff at them. They're like, oh no, I kind of wanted that sort of like indie backpack hip hop stuff. Oh, okay, right. Well, so you have to have those conversations with them.
Yeah, and I think the analytics part is a good thing to go back to as well, because even, when a client has an idea of what indie means to them, based on sort of, the age and usership of their clients, that definition might also be different too. So that's something where you can take a look at the numbers and really start to decipher, like, okay, is this still resonating with the users? Do they feel like this is, when they clicked into this indie station, is this what they expected to find there or not?
Yeah. If it's an older crowd and they want to hear indie rock, and you start throwing some like Ramones at them, that works. But if it's a 18 to 24-year-old customer base, you gotta go with newer.
Yeah.
And what is that? Like, what are some of the newer indie artists out there? Are there folks that you're using in playlists? Who are some of the new indie artists that might come up in our stations?
I mean, I think that there's one, and geez, I don't even know if she signed to a major label at this point, but I came across an artist who broke on TikTok, right? There's an artist named Pink Pantheress, and her music incorporates a lot of sort of like early 90s drum and bass. But she's a 20-year-old girl from, I think, the UK. And so it's got a mixture of this sort of like indie bedroom pop and early 90s drum and bass. So it stands out. It doesn't sound like everything else that is going to be put into that, playlist for the client, Yeah. But they'll recognize it because it's, her music has blown up on TikTok, and, especially if the user base for our clients is younger, they're going to be like, oh my God, I know this from TikTok,
Yeah. I mean, that's a great point, is that, there are so many more platforms now for the truly independent artists to come in and make a name and get noticed without maybe going through the normal label channel. There's just so many different ways to explore and to discover new music. And I know that that's a part of a lot of the curation that we're doing is combining, right, the popular with new music discovery. Anything else that's new or that's been in your rotations lately? Maybe Claire?
Yeah, I mean, I find it really interesting when you can see certain trends making their way, like from a quote unquote indie space into the mainstream. For me, one of the ones that I've been following kind of closely is just sort of this resurgence of pop punk, and sort of where that fits into like an alternative indie space as well. And it's been really interesting to see Travis Barker has been working with a lot of new artists as like the featured drummer on their tracks, which is unusual for a couple reasons. One, in that drummers usually don't get feature credits, not that they don't deserve it, but it's an interesting way to see who, someone who's been super established in the music industry for a very long time, and what sort of they're seeing in the new talent that's coming up. So, yeah.
Awesome. So anything else, like what, we've got about a minute left, maybe just go around, like, what is indie to you? Is there an artist that embodies indie music to you, or what's your 2-sentence definition? We'll start with you, Claire.
Let's see. I mean, this is a little bit of a cop out, but indie is cool and whatever you want it to be. I think it doesn't, I think you don't want to like limit people who are starting their journey out in the music industry. And I think people are attracted to the like genuine factor of making music that's meaningful to you. So I think any way that you can start that journey and connect with people and make music that is doing that is cool.
Awesome. Juan, what do you think?
Indie is just literally what it is, independent. Just being you to the most nth degree, you know? And I think that lineage goes back all the way to Woody Guthrie, you know, and like fast forward to like, you know, like Bob Dylan and things like that. Like, you know, that honesty that comes through indie in this way that is not like aggressive. It's more lyrical, more critical is what I necessarily get from it. But yeah, just I guess just smart music.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I would just sort of paint it with a broad brush and just say, look, you know, it's anything that's left of center from the genre that the masses would try to kind of put you into, and also, you know, music that's authentic and uncompromised. And you can apply that to any indie hip hop, indie rock, indie dance. You know, if it's left of center, if it's uncompromised, I think that counts and qualifies as being indie music.
Right on. Well, thank you guys so much for diving into this very fluid topic. You know, keep it going. Feel free for anyone watching this live or the replay, keep the conversation going in the comments. We'd love to hear from you and what indie music means to you. And thanks again for joining us. This is Inside Music Curation from Feed Media Group, your B2B music streaming platform for businesses. Hope to see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.